Welcome back to Narrow Path Doctrine. My name is Jim. Just want to apologize off the top if you hear some noise off in the distance. Again, there's gentlemen working across the street and making a lot of noise out there. And I am in this professional studio, so what are you going to do, right? Listen, I want to talk today about whether or not Jesus draws all men. This is the argument I've heard from a lot of people, a lot who argue against sovereign grace, who don't like the doctrines of grace, or Calvinism, as some people call it. And they use, a lot of times what people do is they'll use one verse to argue against a doctrine or one verse to confirm a doctrine. And we should never do that. We should always look at the full scope of Scripture, and Scripture interprets Scripture, right? So we can't just take one verse and say, well, see, this verse says this, so your doctrine can't be true. That simply is not the way to actually go through the Bible and to understand proper context and biblical usage, okay? So one of the most common objections, and I've seen this before in comments, about sovereign grace is John 12:32. That verse in particular, they say that overturns the clear teaching, the Calvinistic teaching of John 6:44. And if you know anything about the argument between Arminians and Calvinists, you'll know that John 6:44 is something that comes up quite often. Now, the argument here is simple. If Christ draws all men, is what it says in John 12:32, then the drawing of the Father cannot be limited or effectual. He just draws all men. It sounds persuasive on the surface, but it collapses under careful biblical examination. Scripture doesn't contradict itself. We know this, right? Christ doesn't teach one doctrine in John 6 and then reverse it in John 12. That's silly. The issue is not contradiction, it's context, definition, and biblical usage. And I want to dig into these two verses here next. All right, so John 6:44 is not vague at all. It is not suggestive. It is absolute in its language. I think that most who understand the Calvinistic doctrine, the sovereign grace, the doctrines of grace, do see what we see in John 6:44. We're not making this up. Let's read through the verse here. It says, "No man can come to me except the Father which hath sent me draw him, and I will raise him up at the last day." Now, several truths here are established beyond dispute. First, human inability is explicit. No man can come to me. That's pretty clear, right? This is not unwillingness alone, it's inability. Fallen man lacks the capacity to come to Christ apart from divine action. Now, second, the drawing is necessary and exclusive, except the Father draw him, right? There are no alternative paths, there's no cooperative initiation, there's no neutral ground here. And third, the drawing is effectual and successful. That's the really important part here. It says, and I will raise him up at the last day. That means it's a success, right? Every single person drawn is raised in glory. There are no exceptions. There are no failures. The verse doesn't say Christ tries to raise them. He says he will. So if John 6:44 teaches anything at all, it teaches that everyone drawn is saved. So unless we are universalists, not everyone is drawn. They can't be, right? Now, when we turn to the verse often used to argue against this interpretation, this is Jesus speaking in this verse, by the way. John 12:32, it says, "And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me." Now, the question here is not whether Christ draws. We know that he does, right? The question is what all men means here. Scripture itself must define Scripture, and we'll do that here next. The Bible repeatedly uses the word all to mean all kinds, all groups, or without distinction, not without exception. And this isn't theological maneuvering like those who oppose sovereign grace like to accuse us of. It's basic biblical interpretation. Let's consider some examples here. In Luke 2:1, we read, "And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed." Now, no one believes every human on the entire earth was taxed here. The phrase refers to the Roman world, not every individual without exception. Another example, John 1:7. "The same came for a witness to bear witness of the light, that all men through him might believe." Now, if all men means every individual, then universal salvation follows, which Scripture explicitly denies. Another example, Romans 5:18. Therefore, as by the offense of one judgment came upon all men to condemnation, even so by the righteousness of one the free gift came upon all men unto justification of life. Now, if the second all men here is universal, without exception, then all are justified, which again contradicts Scripture. Clearly, all must be defined by context, never assumed to mean all without exception. The context in John 12 is decisive as well. Just prior to verse 32, we read in John 12:20, it says, "And there were certain Greeks among them that came up to worship at the feast." This is critical here. Greeks, Gentiles, are now seeking Christ. For the first time in John's Gospel, Gentiles explicitly appear seeking access to Jesus. Christ's response is not accidental, it's theological. He declares that his being lifted up will result in drawing not Jews only, but men from every nation, every people, every group. This aligns perfectly with what John later records. In John 11:51 through 52, it says, "And this spake he not of himself, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus should die for that nation, and not for that nation only, but that also he should gather together in one the children of God that were scattered abroad." Not all people, without exception, but the children of God scattered abroad. John 12:32 is about scope, not about success. It answers who will be drawn, not whether all are drawn. So if John 12:32 actually means that everyone is drawn, then universalism has to follow. This is unavoidable and a consequence of this objection. If Christ draws every individual without exception, and if drawing in John 6 results in resurrection, which it states it does, then everyone must be saved. But Scripture explicitly denies this, of course. Matthew 7:13 says, "Enter ye in at the strait gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat." And John 10:26 says, "But ye believe not, because ye are not of my sheep, as I said unto you." So if all are drawn, why do some not believe? Christ answers plainly, they are not his sheep. There's no contradiction here, it's only harmony. John 6 teaches the certainty and effectiveness of divine drawing. John 12 teaches the global reach of that drawing. The Father draws only those he has given to the Son, and the Son gathers them from every tribe, tongue, people, and nation. Where do we read this? Revelation 5:9. It says, "And they sung a new song, saying, Thou art worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof. For thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to God by thy blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation." Not all without exception, but all without distinction. So, in conclusion here, John 12:32 doesn't weaken or change the Calvinistic understanding of John 6:44. It actually confirms it. Christ does not fail to draw those given to him. The Father does not attempt salvation. He accomplishes it. The gospel doesn't depend on human ability, but divine mercy. Those who are drawn will come. Those who come will be raised, and all the glory belongs to God alone. All right, thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope it was edifying. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up and share it with others so they can know the truth. And if you have not subscribed to the channel as of yet, please do so and click the notification bell to get updates when new videos like this one come out. Got a video coming out every couple of days or so. All right, so until next time, remember, true doctrine matters. God bless.
Why do you cry? Why do you always try? God gives his grace a gift, he would never leave you adrift. With his hands he upholds, with his hands he holds you close. With his hands he draws you near, in his hands there is no fear. With his hands he upholds, with his hands he holds you close. With his hands he draws